You think you're strong because you endured pain, because you didn't complain, because you stayed quiet when the world crushed you under its weight. But Carl Jung would say, that's not strength, that's survival. And there's a big difference. Survival means you're still breathing, yes, but strength, real strength, it means no one can control how you breathe. You grew up thinking that if you stayed invisible, you'd be safe. If you didn't make noise, no one would hurt you. That if you were nice, people would finally treat you the way you deserve. And so you became the quiet one, the soft one, the understanding one, the one who gets overlooked in every room, the one who always lets it slide, the one who gets used to the silence, even when that silence screams you've been forgotten. But let's tell the truth. You didn't choose to be calm. You were trained into submission. You were broken until silence felt like protection. And now you don't fight because you're peaceful. You don't fight because you no longer know how. Carl Jung once wrote that what we do not confront within ourselves will show up as fate. In other words, your unhealed wounds, your repressed anger, your hidden shame, your quiet desperation are not staying hidden. They are shaping your life, your relationships, your failures. And the worst part? Everyone around you can sense it. They know you're breakable. They know you're manageable. And deep down you know they know. You may look composed on the outside, maybe you smile, maybe you nod. Maybe you try to be the most helpful, the most accommodating, but inside, you're screaming, you're furious, you're exhausted, and you're terrified that if you ever let it all out, no one would love what they see, that if you showed the storm you carry, they'd run. So, you hide it. You hide your rage when someone disrespects you. You hide your sadness when someone forgets you. You hide your fear when someone threatens to leave. But every time you hide, you disappear bit by bit, day by day. Until one morning you wake up and realize something brutal. You're no longer even a person to them. You're a utility, a placeholder, a backdrop in someone else's life story. And now you wonder why people ignore you, why they don't listen when you speak, why they take from you without ever giving back, why you're the last one they call, the first one they cancel, and the one they treat as disposable. Let me be blunt. It's because you became too easy to erase, not because you're worthless, but because you taught them to treat you that way. If this message found you at the right time, write in the comments, I'm choosing strength in silence. Let's create a space where the strongest voices are the quietest ones. And if you felt seen here, subscribe now. This journey is just beginning. Carl Jung believed that the psyche, when silence too long, begins to rot. That inside every passive person is a violent truth, clawing to be set free. That when you repress your emotions, you don't become more spiritual, more mature, more balanced. You become more predictable. And predictability is weakness in the eyes of manipulators. People study you. They see how you flinch when they raise their voice, how quickly you apologize, even when you're not wrong, how eager you are to explain yourself, to make peace, to earn their love. They don't admire you for that, they use it against you. Because if your emotional stability depends on their approval, they own you. And here's what no one tells you. The world is not designed to reward kindness. It rewards presence, power, boundaries, and unfortunately, it punishes those who seek peace at the cost of self-respect. This is the trap you fell into. You thought that if you were just good enough, kind enough, selfless enough, someone would finally notice you, finally choose you, finally treat you the way you treat everyone else. But they won't, because in their eyes, you're not a force. You're a cushion, a buffer, a convenience, and nothing about that inspires respect, fear, or loyalty. If you want to be noticed, to be respected, you must become someone people cannot ignore. You must become someone whose silence is louder than their noise, whose boundaries are not spoken but felt, whose presence shifts the energy in a room, not because you're loud, but because you're no longer breakable. And that doesn't happen by pretending you're okay. It happens when you confront the truth. You are not weak, but you've allowed your mind to stay soft. You've allowed your wounds to be hidden instead of healed. You've confused avoidance with peace. But peace doesn't come from hiding. It comes from becoming someone who no longer fears being seen. That's the mind you must build. A mind so aware of its own darkness that it no longer flinches in the face of conflict. A mind that's been through war and came back unrecognizable. A mind that terrifies people not because it's cruel, but because it refuses to be controlled. You're not too emotional. You're too repressed. You're not too weak. You've just never been taught how to own your fire. But if you're still here, I'm still watching, still breathing, it means one thing: that fire is still alive. It's waiting for you to stop hiding, to stop begging for space in other people's lives, to stop shrinking for love that doesn't even see you. And if you're ready, really ready, then it's time to wake up, because the person you've been pretending to be is killing the person you were born to become. And this is just the beginning. You've been told that anger is dangerous, that rage must be suppressed, that silence is maturity. But Carl Jung didn't agree. He believed that what you repress becomes your master, that when you bury your anger, you don't eliminate it, you feed it, you give it power over you. And worse, you make yourself easy to disarm. The world isn't afraid of someone who hides their fire. It's afraid of someone who knows how to hold it without being burned. Let me ask you something. How many times have you bitten your tongue? Not because you forgave someone, but because you were too afraid of losing them. How many times have you smiled through disrespect, not because you're above it, but because you didn't believe you were allowed to stand your ground? That's not peace, that's paralysis. And everyone around you can feel it. They may not say it, but they know that if they push hard enough, you'll fold. That if they threaten to walk away, you'll beg. That if they throw guilt at you, you'll apologize, even for existing. Carl Jung called this the disempowered self, a self that seeks harmony by betraying itself, a self that avoids conflict to maintain connection. But what connection is worth keeping if it demands you disappear? Here's the truth you don't want to hear. The reason they don't respect you is because you never showed them your teeth. You never made it clear that there's a limit. You never made it dangerous to mistreat you. You never allowed your inner fire to burn bright enough to force them to look twice, because you were taught that rage is ugly, that power is evil, that being intimidating is wrong. But that's a lie sold to you by people who benefit from your compliance. Yes, rage can be destructive, but only when it owns you. When you own it, when you tame it, it becomes your spine. It becomes the voice that says, enough. It becomes the boundary that doesn't shake when tested. It becomes the quiet strength that doesn't need to scream to be heard. Think about it. What do people truly fear? They don't fear loudness. They fear presence. They don't fear fists. They fear the person who doesn't flinch. They don't fear your pain. They fear your clarity. And clarity only comes when you stop lying to yourself about who you are, what you feel, and what you're no longer willing to tolerate. Have you ever noticed how people treat someone differently the moment they show they're done explaining? That silence after a boundary is set. That shift in energy when someone realizes you won't be guilted anymore. That's power. And it doesn't come from pretending to be a saint. It comes from embracing the part of you that's been chained your entire life, your raw, primal, unapologetic self. Carl Jung taught that we are all born with a shadow, a darker, instinctual part of us that holds our aggression, our desires, our potential for dominance. And society teaches us to lock it away, to suppress it, to fear it, but suppression breeds sickness. That's why you feel so drained all the time. That's why you explode over small things but stay silent during betrayal. That's why people walk over you and you say nothing, but then cry when you're alone. Because you've been taught that expressing your power is dangerous, but being without it is what's truly killing you. What if I told you that your anger isn't a weakness, it's the compass to your boundaries? What if I told you that your frustration isn't something to hide, but a sign that your values are being violated? What if I told you that your rage isn't something to cure, but something to channel? This isn't about becoming aggressive. It's about becoming someone who no longer lets their fear of being disliked override their need to be respected. It's about becoming someone who doesn't trade self-respect for peace, because that's not peace, it's self-erasure. So how do you reclaim that fire? Start by noticing the moments you feel yourself shrinking, the moments you hesitate to speak, the moments you lower your voice, your standards, your needs. Ask yourself, who taught me that I had to be small to be safe? Who benefits when I stay silent? Who loses when I finally speak? And more importantly, are you willing to lose yourself just to keep people who never really saw you? You think being soft makes you lovable, but love without power isn't love, it's pity. You think being agreeable makes you likable, but likability without self-respect is manipulation. You think being kind makes you safe, but safety without strength is just captivity with nicer walls. Carl Jung said that only by confronting the shadow can we become whole. That means you must meet your rage, look it in the eye, let it speak, Let it tell you what you've tolerated for too long. Let it show you what you truly care about. Because beneath your anger is your truth, and beneath that truth is your power. And when you begin to own it, when you stop apologizing for it, people will feel it. They'll pause before crossing you. They'll adjust their tone. They'll think twice, not because you're scary, but because you finally stop being scared, and this is only the beginning. The next step? Learning how to unhook yourself from their approval. Because as long as you need to be liked, you'll never be feared. And as long as you're afraid to be feared, you'll never be respected. Are you ready for that truth? You spend your life chasing one thing you don't even realize is killing you. Approval. It's invisible, silent, socially acceptable. It hides behind your best behavior, your nicest words, your softest apologies. But make no mistake, the more you seek to be accepted by others, the more you abandon yourself. And no mind built on abandonment can ever be strong. Carl Jung didn't believe in the self that molds itself to please. He believed in the self that emerges from confrontation, from truth, from raw inner work. But let's be honest, you were never taught to value that kind of self. You were taught to be likable, to be agreeable, to avoid rejection at all costs. And now you're exhausted. You bend over backwards to be chosen. You bite your tongue to be included. You betray your instincts to keep a seat at tables that weren't built for you in the first place. You smile when you're dying inside. Comment below, "My power no longer needs permission," if something in this video shifted your perspective. And if you want more content that speaks to the soul, go ahead and subscribe. There's much more waiting for you. You say it's fine when it's not. You stay when everything in you is begging to walk away. And the people around you, they see it. Maybe they don't say it out loud, but they feel it. They know you can be guilted, pressured, controlled, and that's why you're never fully respected, because you've made their opinion of you more important than your own. Here's the brutal truth. Until you no longer need them to approve of you, they will always have power over you. The paradox is cruel. The moment you finally become magnetic, commanding, unshakable, deeply respected, is the moment you no longer care if they like you or not. That's when people stop underestimating you. That's when they stop playing games, because the game only works on someone who's afraid of losing. But you've made losing people your greatest fear. So much so that you've been willing to lose yourself instead. You think they'll love you more if you stay soft, if you don't challenge them, if you always say yes. But Carl Jung would tell you that's not love. That's performance. It's not intimacy. It's invisibility, and no matter how well you perform, there will always be someone who disapproves. So why not finally let them? Why not let them talk? Let them walk? Let them misunderstand you, because once you do, you'll experience something they never taught you in school or church or therapy: freedom. The kind of freedom that comes when you finally realize you don't need anyone's permission to be yourself. The kind that makes your presence impossible to ignore. The kind that builds a mind so unshakable, it terrifies people who rely on control to feel powerful. And you know what happens then? People start watching their words around you. They stop testing your limits. They begin treating you as someone with gravity, because you are no longer an echo of their expectations. You've become the voice of your own. Let me give you an example. There's a man who once lived his life entirely for others, always smiling, always available, always the helper. He thought that being liked would protect him, but it didn't. People walked over him, used him, ignored his boundaries, and every time he wanted to speak up, a voice inside said, "But what if they stop loving you?" So he stayed quiet, until one day, something broke. He realized that their love had always been conditional. It wasn't love, it was comfort, and he was done being the pillow they leaned on while they stabbed him with disrespect. He stopped answering every call. He started saying no. He began walking out of rooms where his soul didn't feel safe. And do you know what happened? People got angry, offended, confused. Some called him arrogant, but others respected him more. He didn't become cruel. He became clear. And in that clarity, his mind became sharp, unshakable, powerful. That's what Carl Jung meant by individuation. It's the process of becoming so whole, so integrated, that you can finally stand alone. Not lonely, but sovereign. So I'll ask you, how much of your personality is just a collection of reactions to what you think people want from you? How much of your life is based on avoiding disapproval? How much power have you given to people who wouldn't even notice if you disappeared? And most importantly, How much longer are you willing to perform? Because here's the secret. Strong minds don't chase approval. They chase truth. Strong minds don't fear rejection. They fear self-betrayal. Strong minds don't ask for validation. They embody certainty. And once you get there, once you've peeled back the layers of neediness and insecurity, you start to see the game for what it is. Most people aren't looking for connection. They're looking for control. They don't want you. They want the version of you that makes them comfortable. And when that version dies, so does their illusion of power. But that's not your problem anymore. You were not born to be agreeable. You were not born to be acceptable. You were born to become real. And real people don't seek the spotlight, they become it. That's what Jung was pointing to all along. The terrifying, liberating truth that you only become fully alive when you stop needing the world to clap. So next time you feel the pull to explain yourself, stop. Next time you feel the urge to justify your decision, breathe. Next time someone tries to bait you with disapproval, smile, because now you know the truth. The person who doesn't need to be liked holds all the power. And that power, it terrifies the weak. Now it's time to go even deeper, because power without emotional control isn't strength, it's chaos. And in the next part, we'll see what it means to master your inner storm so completely that even your silence becomes a threat. Are you ready? Most people are terrified of their own mind. That's why they stay busy, addicted, distracted, because silence reveals too much. It confronts them with thoughts they've buried under years of noise. But here's the paradox. The strongest minds in the world aren't the loudest. They're the ones who can sit in complete stillness and not flinch. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." And you? How many hours have you spent running from yourself? The truth is, chaos isn't what breaks you. What breaks you is your inability to understand that the chaos inside you was never your enemy. It was your compass. You were never supposed to suppress it. You were supposed to learn how to listen to it without letting it control you. That's what Jung meant by integrating the shadow, not erasing your darkness, but giving it a name, a shape, a voice, so that instead of being possessed by what you refuse to face, you become the master of it. Imagine this. There's a storm outside your window. The wind is howling. Rain is slamming against the glass. But inside, the house is silent, unmoving. Why? Because it's been built to endure. That's what your mind can become, a fortress. Not because there is no chaos, but because the chaos no longer dictates your behavior. You don't explode when you're angry. You don't crumble when you're sad. You don't beg when you're scared. You feel it all, fully, deeply, but you choose your response. And that terrifies people. Because most are slaves to their emotions. They scream when they feel ignored. They manipulate when they feel small. They retreat when they feel unsafe. And when they meet someone who feels all those things, but does not react, they panic, because they realize they've lost the upper hand. Controlled emotions are not a sign of numbness. They're the signature of mastery. You become unpredictable in the best way possible. People can't read you. They can't provoke you. They can't reduce you to a label. They feel your presence, but they don't know what you're thinking. And that's where the power is. Your stillness becomes intimidating. Your calm becomes a mirror in which others see their own instability. But you didn't get here overnight. You got here through nights of wrestling with your mind. You got here by confronting every ugly part of yourself and refusing to look away. You got here by asking, why do I feel the need to prove myself? Why do I need to control outcomes? Why am I still afraid of being alone? And when the answers came, dark, raw, uncomfortable, you didn't run. You stayed. And something shifted. You stopped reacting just to react. You started observing, choosing, moving with precision. You became the person who can sit in a room full of chaos and not be pulled into it. The person who doesn't need to dominate to feel powerful. The person who speaks only when it matters, and when they do, every word lands like a strike. Let me give you an example. There was a woman who used to be controlled by her emotions. She was sensitive, reactive, easily offended. People knew how to push her buttons, and they did, constantly. But after years of being emotionally used and discarded, she changed, not by becoming colder, but by becoming stiller. She started journaling, meditating, reading Jung. She faced her jealousy, her rage, her fear of being irrelevant. She cried, she broke, but she didn't stop. And then one day someone tried to provoke her like always. But this time she didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She just looked at them and smiled. And in that moment, the dynamic shifted. The person who once controlled her no longer had access. Why? Because she had closed every door inside herself that they once entered through. Her peace had become her protection. That's the kind of mind you're building now. Not loud, not aggressive, but anchored, immovable. And here's the secret. Most won't tell you. People don't fear strength they can understand. They fear strength they can't measure. They fear the person who can sit across from them and say nothing, because that silence speaks louder than any outburst ever could. They fear the man who isn't desperate to prove he's a man. They fear the woman who doesn't chase love to feel worthy. They fear the soul that has made peace with itself because it's immune to manipulation. Carl Jung knew this. He believed that true power comes not from conquering others, but from conquering yourself. And once you've done that, once you've sat alone with your darkness and not run away, you start walking into every room differently. You don't need to raise your voice. Your energy enters before you do. People sense it. They don't know why, but they respect you. They watch what they say. They think twice before crossing your boundaries, not because you've threatened them, but because you've done the one thing they're still too scared to do: look in the mirror without turning away. You don't seek control. You embody it. You don't demand power. You become it. And in doing so, you turn your silence into a weapon more devastating than any scream. But this isn't the end. There's one final shift, because once you've built a mind that can't be shaken, there's something even more dangerous. Becoming the kind of person who no longer reacts at all, but transforms everything they touch simply by being. A presence that alters every room it enters. And in the next part, you'll see exactly what that looks like. There comes a point in your transformation when you realize something profound. You no longer need to convince anyone of anything. If this video echoed something deep inside you, drop a comment saying, "I am not who I used to be." Let your voice mark the beginning of your transformation. And don't forget to subscribe, because this is the place where minds awaken. Not your worth, not your power, not your truth. You just exist, and your existence speaks for itself. That is the final form of strength, not dominance, not control, but presence. A presence so complete, so integrated, so rooted in authenticity, that it alters the space around you without effort. Carl Jung understood this. He knew that true individuation, the full emergence of the self, doesn't scream. It radiates. You've walked the fire. You've confronted the shadows. You've buried the need for approval. You've mastered your emotional storms. And now you arrive in this final place, not as someone trying to be strong, but as someone who simply is. You don't chase. You attract. You don't explain. You exemplify. You don't manipulate outcomes. You embody truth. And in doing so, you become something terrifying to those who still live in masks. You become the mirror they've spent their lives avoiding. And most will run from that mirror. But some, the brave ones, they will see you and awaken. Not because you told them to, but because your life itself has become a silent invitation. Rise. That's what a powerful mind does. It stops reacting and starts transforming. Not just internally, but externally. You start to notice that your relationships shift, that certain people fall away, that new ones appear, drawn not to your image, but to your energy. Your silence becomes respected. Your boundaries become unspoken law. Your presence becomes peace. Not because you control anyone, but because you've mastered the one thing no one ever teaches you to master: your own self. That's where Carl Jung's work leads, to the realization that the strongest person in the room is the one who no longer needs the room, the one who can be alone and still feel full, the one who isn't driven by fear, but by clarity, the one who doesn't dominate with noise, but influences with gravity. This is who you are becoming. And now, as you stand at the edge of this transformation, ask yourself, what are you still holding on to? Whose approval still lingers in your mind like a chain? What fear are you still obeying like a quiet master? Because now is the time to burn it all. Now is the time to choose truth, even if it costs you comfort. Now is the time to embody power, even if it intimidates others. Now is the time to rise, not louder, but deeper. And as you do, people will ask what changed. Don't tell them. Just smile. Because the strongest minds don't explain, they demonstrate, and that is enough. Thank you for walking this path with me. If this message resonated with you, if it reached into something you've long buried, then let this be your sign. The silence you've feared is not your enemy. It's your weapon. Use it wisely. Now, before you go, there's one more step. On your screen, you'll see the next video, and I promise you, it goes even deeper. Into the parts of your mind that still hold you hostage, into the fears you've rationalized for years, into the truths that will finally break the chains you didn't even know you wore. If you thought this video changed you, the next one will unmake you and rebuild you from the ground up. Click it now. I'll meet you there.